All right, so I'm Sarah Alford, and I'm a BCBA. I am not autistic, but I am neurodivergent.
Hi, I'm Shannon Biaggi. I am a neurotypical behavior analyst practicing in the area of organizational behavior management and systems.
Hi, I'm Megan Miller. I'm a BCBAD, neurotypical, and I mostly provide consultation and professional development.
And hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Newman. I am autistic. I work as a case manager for home and community-based services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autistic people, and work with plenty of BCBAs as part of that.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Vassar. I'm autistic and I also work in the field of ABA. I currently am an RBT and will qualify to sit for the BCBA exam in the coming months. I currently work with adolescents and do a lot of advocacy work within reform. That's kind of my thing right now.
So everyone, this conversation is going to be about the ABA version of the Cards Against Humanity game that was developed mainly on Facebook groups in threads about 5 years ago, collaboratively by many ABA providers. This conversation is long overdue. It's not going to be adequate. It's not trying to ask for forgiveness. We're not trying to resolve this. This is about accountability. This is something our field needs to talk about, and it's been a long time coming, and we need to talk about it. So before we get started, really quick, I just want to talk specifically to the ABA people that are watching this video. I know our natural inclination when we're being called out over something uncomfortable is going to be to get really defensive. This incident that we're going to be talking about and the surrounding culture that sort of brought it out of us and brought it about, these things don't reflect well on us. It's going to make us uncomfortable, and it should. It's going to look bad because it was bad, and that's why we're talking about this. Especially in light of what's happened in our country over the last few weeks, I think it's even more important that we understand that what anyone does or what people do in our field, especially under the name of ABA, reflects on all of us who call ourselves BCBAs, call ourselves ABA providers. And we're all accountable for those actions and to make sure that we speak out against them. Because if we don't speak out against that, if we sweep it under the rug, if we dirty delete it, or if we stay silent, we are complicit. So just keep in mind while you're commenting and dialoguing about this video, we're not going to be tone policing people who are sharing their experiences of trauma and hurt. We don't condone name calling. We're not condoning specific attacks or threats against people. Basically the rules like don't be a dick. Let's talk about taking accountability and what we as a field need to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happened first, because some of you may not know the whole story about the Cards Against Humanity incident in the ABA field. So Shannon, go ahead.
Yeah, so where this story kind of starts is around mid-2016. I was in graduate school for a degree in behavior analysis with my emphasis in OBM. So a bunch of us students got together and we'd really gotten into playing this game, Cards Against Humanity. So for those of you who don't know what Cards Against Humanity is, it's a extremely crude card game in which players are filling in the blanks with other cards that are usually dirty, sometimes gross, often fairly humorous, sometimes not really humorous at all, words and phrases. So we would get together in grad school and do this about once a week or so. And it was often over drinks, and we would just kind of laugh off the stress for better or worse. So one night we actually started adding inside jokes from our classes, and that expanded into being professors' names, and that turned into terminology that sounded kind of funny from our behavior analysis courses. And then the following day, and I promise I was not drinking at the time, I had a terrible idea, which was to put this out to the broader ABA community and crowdsource some additional ideas for cards for our game. So I asked if anybody had ever played before and what ideas they might have for these cards. And the reaction that we got from this post was pretty much instant. Dozens of ideas just start flooding in, and then it grew into hundreds and hundreds of these ideas. And for the most part, the cards early on, they were, general concepts. They were dirty and funny. And then we kind of just let the really offensive ones slide by with, relatively little acknowledgement, which is passive neutrality that is extremely dangerous right now. So after a while, the notifications got overwhelming, and I ended up, turning it off after a couple of days. But at that point, there was a few hundred posts of these cards being crowdsourced.
I saw one of the threads kind of building early on, sort of scanned through them. I think I was either a student or had just graduated at the time, so the technical terms, I was like, oh yeah, these are ABA things. I didn't even think about what rabbit holes that it could, and I mean, obviously would go down. And when I heard about the uproar later from autistics, I didn't hear it from autistics. I heard that there was an uproar from autistics sort of in distant Facebook land. I just, assumed, well, I wasn't part of that. I saw it being created, but I wasn't part of it. So I just sort of let it go. And I know now that everything our field does and everything we stay silent on reflects on all of us. And that's why I'm here. That's why we're talking now.
So my recall is not quite as detailed as some of the others. I remember seeing a post somewhere about the cards, and I looked at them and I was immediately appalled by some of them. I took quick action to inform my team at Navigation at the time, the company that I owned, that they should not use these cards and they should not take them to parties or do anything like that. I recommended that when encountering things like this and other humorous posts on Facebook, to take into account the perspectives of their clients before interacting with something like this. But on the flip side, I also quickly defended some of the posts that were shared the cards. She was being attacked for posting the cards without taking the time to listen. For me, I didn't take the time to listen to those who were expressing how it was affecting them. I was so focused on protecting my colleague and helping everyone understand that she's a good person that I missed an even larger opportunity. It wasn't until a parent on the thread where I was defending the post said something, not defending the cards, but defending the initial post, said something along the lines of pleading with us to think about how our clients might feel and how parents would feel if they read these cards, and not only took offense to them, but pictured the people who were coming into their family's home to work with them, leaving the home and going to after hours to play games like this and make fun of the families and the clients that they were serving. I also didn't speak out as much against the cards as I should have, and I know now that silence is not the answer in these types of situations. More recently, Jeff made a comment on a Do Better post that I made about just the broad game that Shannon was describing earlier that they used to play before, called Cards Against Humanity. And there was a new thing going around with COVID that you could play that game virtually. I honestly didn't even think about the behavior analytic version and the harm that it caused when I made the post, or the trauma that it would recreate. Jeff's comment was deleted because I didn't think it would have the conversation around it that it deserved. But I've also learned since then it's better to let the comments stay so as not to silence people and to encourage professional and positive discourse, similar to what we are asking everyone to do that is viewing this video. We can't learn from each other and do better if we silence those who make us feel uncomfortable. The comment was deleted because I was away from my computer that day and I was worried the conversation would go south quickly. I have learned better ways to handle these moments. very grateful to you, Jeff, for being one of those big influencers and teaching me. And I will continue to learn from others on this topic.
So here's how I encountered the cards. In December 2016, they were a lot of the cards were compiled into a PDF that then got hosted on a major ABA Facebook page, and that post also got huge. It amassed 1,100 likes and something like 300 comments, and became a very big post. But I didn't find it then. I found it in, I believe, August 2017, when an autistic activist who runs a page called Unstrange Mind posted about it. And so I want to take a moment and actually show some of these cards and talk about what I encountered when following this link and trying to figure out what my friend was talking about and why my friend was so upset. And so just as a setup, this is a content warning, and I don't want to spend too much time harping on this or making this the central point of this video, but I think people have to see this to understand. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take about 3 minutes and go through kind of some of the card content, and then we're going to have a stop to it, and we're really not going to reference that card content past that point. So we're going to put a caption up that's going to tell you if you don't want to look at this at all, we understand that. It's going to tell you when in the video you can skip to where we resume talking about it and not directly referencing specific things of it. So I am going to start here and actually bring up the cards, some examples of what we're talking about in terms of some of the stuff that's in this deck that was posted as a PDF and then got shared all over the ABA internet. So first, to what Shannon was talking about.
Sorry. Can you go back to the first slide real quick, the content warning one?
That's the second slide. You want me to go back to it?
No, that's fine. Either way, I did want to make sure, because we may do some live watching of this. If anyone's watching this live, you won't be able to slide the video. So wait, walk away, mute the computer, and come back when you see this content warning slide come up again in a few minutes.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
That is a good way to do that. Let's do it. So, like what Shannon was talking about, I think you can see in the finished product of this, you can see that clearly this started out with kind of, ABA in-jokes and jokes about the student experience. And there is a lot of professors' names in there and a lot of wonky ABA in-joke type stuff. And these cards are examples of that. Skinner's glasses, conjunctive schedule. I have no idea what conditioner of a conditioner is, but that seems funny if that's a thing. But really quickly, they make a slide towards wow. And so we're going to get into that. There are 7 total slides in the deck covering disgusting reinforcement food. Reinforcer box covered in ants, 3-week-old cookies, a pocket full of Linny Skittles, holding a gummy in your hands until it is just goo. This was a common thread of people making jokes about feeding other human beings gross food so they do what guys want them to do. That is somebody that's been given reinforcement food in my life. Ow. So there's 8 cards in the deck that are covering making fun of accidents or bathroom use. So we have poo on the floor, poo on the chair, poo on the table, poo on the walls, poo everywhere. We have fecal smearing. We have I got bodily fluids on my blank. We have fecal matter. And we have several more along those lines. There are 14 different cards in this deck By the way, there is a total of 225 cards in this deck. And there are 14 that cover stuff in the world of restraints, acts of violence, or otherwise getting physical with people. So we have a bruise the size of a cantaloupe, pinch the nose to release the jaw. We have, during an extinction burst, a client hit me with blank, two-person restraint, physical restraints. And as part of that, there's two separate cards talking about electric shock. Electric shock therapy, deemed useful for improving blank, well blank. I don't think I need to lecture the audience to this, the seriousness and the controversy around use of that. And so I guess I won't. And then there's more cards that are just, you know, what are we thinking? So a couple of these, this study, a rapid method of toilet training the institutionalized retarded. For those that may not be familiar with what that card is referencing, that's a study from the 1970s that took a whole bunch of institutionalized people and either locked them in the bathroom all day while forcing them to drink copious amounts of water and then screaming at them when they had the inevitable accident to drive behavior change through shame. Or if they were lucky enough to not be forced to spend their entire day after day in a bathroom, they were forced to stay immediately outside the bathroom. Also drinking copious amounts of water, being screamed at and forced to clean up when the inevitable accident that they were being forced to have happened. And then just stuff like, watch what I can make him do. If I ring this bell, he blanks. You know, I guessing that's a Pavlov's dog joke, but we're talking about human beings. So this is some of the content in that card deck, but it's not the only stuff. This is just the stuff that is like the worst of the worst. There's a whole bunch of cards in there they're enabling jokes about unethical conduct, plenty of jokes about drinking, and like there's a lot of jokes about specifically referring to client genitals or genitals in general. Like there seriously is a lot. It comes up several times of like jewelry shaped like a phallus and clients can only touch their genitals in X. Like there's a lot of that stuff in there. So that is the kind of stuff when we're talking about this deck, this is the content that we were talking about. So
can I jump in real quick, Jeff?
Yes.
For the statement about that research paper, that's still referenced in education today. I finished my program for my master's in May, and I had that referenced as a tool to help me with potty training clients in around October or November of last year. So it's still being used in our education system for ABA. So yes, it's in the past, but it's still being used in the present. So please, whoever's watching, don't dismiss the content there as, oh, well, that's old ABA, because it's frankly not.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. The only reason I'm familiar with that study is a BCBA gave me that study in 2018, suggesting that it be adapted for use with somebody that we were both working with, including the part about drinking copious amounts of water to precipitate accidents. So that was like it was not being introduced as something historical. It was being introduced as something valid to use in 2018 in an adapted format. Okay, so I'm gonna take screen sharing off here, and that is the end of talking about specifics of what's in those cards. And thank you, people, for going along with that ride. In August 2017, that is what I encountered. And that is how that was my introduction to just seeing that and getting hit across the face with it, and being utterly shocked. And that is how the autistic world, for the most part, got their introduction to those cards most of a year after they were first posted. And not seeing 1,100 likes, 300 comments on the thread posting that PDF, and not naysayers in there. And I think it's important to talk about what happened to Unstrange Mind and on his page when he posted that. There were a lot of people that came to defend the ABA world against those cards, that it was only a few people, that didn't reflect, that our interpretation of the cards was totally inaccurate, and it wasn't really setting up the jokes that it was clearly setting up. And a lot of that took the form of just a full-throated defense. Like in those days that thread on the Unstrange Minds page discussing these cards and being shocked and horrified by them, there was a BCBA that came in and chose that moment to say that the person that facilitates the Unstrange Mind page isn't actually autistic. Chose that moment to have that argument. And so that was my introduction, is reading his post the day he made it and getting horrified.
I came into this situation towards the end, as in the last couple months. I didn't start working in ABA till 2018, which is around the same time I discovered I'm autistic and got diagnosed. It wasn't until this year that I even heard of the Cards Against Humanity ABA story. It got mentioned on a page somewhere on Facebook, and I ignored it because I can't stand the game in general. So much like Sarah said, that like, oh, this isn't a conversation for me, I didn't delve in because I hate that game. I refuse to have it in my household so much, like kind of thing. Then I joined the reform conversation and actually look at the cards, because I realized, okay, well, I should actually pay attention to this. It disgusted me because these cards reflect on me and my clients who I love. I stayed in the field knowing the wrong that happens because it feels I'm in a position to advocate for them. Yet here are these cards that show just how nasty the field is, how nasty my former coworkers may have been towards me, and I'll never know how the kids I spent my time with are then talked about. It broke and still breaks my heart. And this is what RBTs like myself are seeing in ABA space on Facebook. This is what they're taught as okay behavior for them to engage in. And no one steps in to say it's wrong. So the problem is perpetuated. And I want better for autistics. I want better for those who work for us. So that's where I come into this story.
So, I talked about like what my initial reaction was discovering the cards, but that wasn't my only reaction. I had a very personal and very intense reaction from that, and it's a reaction as somebody that grew up with therapists. I was in special education until I graduated high school. I had an IEP every year. And I had plenty of therapists working with me. And I know a lot of those therapists didn't like me, didn't want to be spending their day with me. That certainly rubbed off on me. And one of the recurring themes of growing up autistic in a world where you're not really accepted is people giving you implicit and explicit messages that you're broken and you're only acceptable as much as you can pretend to be like everybody else. And so growing up with that, I have a constant little voice in my head that tells me nobody likes you and you're doing it wrong and you're being weird and you need to stop. And that voice never shuts up, and I don't expect it ever will shut up in my life. In reading those cards, fully validated that voice. for myself, for other people, for just so as I was reading those cards, all that was coming to my head is this is what your therapist really thought about you. And I know some of them did. I know some of them would make fun of my bathroom accidents. I know some of them would make fun of the weird ways I acted. I know some of them probably would make fun of like what I would do for gross food. I know all of those things, and I know of thousands of autistic people like me where those same things could be said about. And I could imagine those therapists sitting there and playing that game and throwing those cards down saying, this is so Jeff, or other people. And it breaks my heart. And it put me into a full-blown mental health crisis. I had to come home from that and tell my wife what was going on and tell my wife to keep an eye on me. I couldn't even really explain totally what was going on because I started explaining like, hey, in the ABA world, I came across like there was thousands of people that liked this post about, you know, and I started describing the cards and my wife shut me down and said, please stop, please stop, please stop. I can't handle child abuse. So I stopped, but I spent in that midst of trying to avoid myself getting to that point where I had to tell people, look out for me, and ask me where I'm going, and you know, just know that I'm having like ideation and stuff. That one of the things I did was I seized on that there has to be in that thread on Facebook, there has to be somebody that objects to these cards. This can't be everybody because it's Cards Against Humanity. And Cards Against Humanity, the self-acknowledged game for terrible people, it's controversial, and there's plenty of people like Alexander, you said, it's not their thing. I'll own that in our cabinet of games, Cards Against Humanity is one of the games in there. But I know it's not for everybody. And so I was sure that I would find something I could seize onto and save my mental health of objections. So I read through that entire thread really quickly and desperately looking for where is the objection? Where are the people that said, this is icky, this is gross, why are we doing this? And that's not what I found. I found people talking about playing this in an organized way at ABA conferences, playing this as team builders after they'd let kids like I was as a kid, you know, presumably go home for the day. And that's what I found. I found over and over and over people feeding back in and laughing at this and thinking this is funny. And it destroyed me. Just, and it caused me to lose so much trust because I work with BCBAs professionally. I have plenty of in-person relationships, and people I know personally, face-to-face, in person, could very well have written those cards. I don't know if they did. The threads are all gone. And I don't know if they laughed at it, and I don't know if they ever played that deck, and I never will know. And I can't help, even today, years later, wondering, for everybody in the profession I meet, knowing how many people either liked or made cards or commented in support or played or watched it happen and either went along with it, or if they had reservations, those reservations weren't aired. And it really hurts. Really hurts.
Thank you for sharing with us, Jeff. Hopefully, for those that are watching, it's more than just seeing comments posted, seeing that effect that these cards are similar could have on people. My emotions and feelings and reactions were not as in depth. I was shocked at some of the cards. I honestly, wow, Jeff, and wow, that you were able to look at all of them. I looked at about 5 and then I stopped. I was confused as to how people in our field said things like on the post. I do remember seeing a few people saying things like, oh, we're just having fun. Can't people take a joke and things like that without realizing the impact they were having. Despite this, I didn't speak up as I should have, and I definitely didn't check in with any of my autistic friends or peers to see, you know, how this was affecting them or what we could do. And I definitely regret that.
Like Megan, I also regret not saying anything. When I hear Jeff, he's talked about looking through the thread, looking for someone to speak up, someone that could have, and knowing that I was one of the people that went through the thread and just said, oh, well, everybody seems to, be enjoying it so far. And then I just disengaged instead of speaking up. And that's something that I will always regret and continue to regret in general in our field, of not speaking up every time I see someone in our field doing something wrong. And that's something that I'm going to change. That's something that I'm going to keep working on, because when I saw those cards, my first thought was, no, it doesn't apply to me, and I stopped. And we're not going to do that anymore.
There we are. Sorry about that. Yeah, when I learned about these and I read some of them, Jeff, I commend you, because I could not read all of them. I read as many as I could get through to understand the scope of this, and I was disgusted by the field, disgusted by it having been swept under the rug, disgusted with myself for being part of the system that allowed it to happen. Like, gave me serious thoughts of like, why am I staying? Why am I here? I should go get a different degree and just take the loss of the degree I currently have. It did not make me feel safe as an autistic practitioner among my peers. Like, how many of my peers make such references that they may or may not know do relate to me and my life experience. And that doesn't feel very good to work in any ABA company as an autistic, knowing that this type of thing floats around out there. And these are thoughts that my peers have about my other set of peers, my autistic peers and myself. Also, significant amount of fear for autistics formerly or currently receiving services from people who made these cards. Yeah, it's a complicated set of feelings, but it is one that I still have days where I see conversations that happen that I question my choice to stay in the field and whether or not I can be effective. I'm here, I'm having the conversation, and I don't think that I'll be going anywhere, but things like this, when they get swept under the rug, they definitely make me question whether or not I'm safe in this field as an autistic. So that's, yeah.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit now about how did this happen? How did this come about? Why did our institution fail? Who would like to go?
I can kind of lead off on that. Because one of the things I feel from looking at how this played out, in one of the things that feels like it could have put the brakes on this is missing that perspective. I think there is not, even though the vast majority, sometimes I say autistics pay ABA's bills because the vast majority of the field is working for autistic people. A lot of you are working for kids, really young kids, and I think you have a difficulty taking perspective to connect that really young kid with people that would then go and read that and internalize it about themselves, connecting that kid with the adult they turn into, which is people like me, and a lot of other people, or that they would connect with parents of kids like me. And I think that there's kind of a chronic lack of engagement between real conversations and real understanding autistic people, and not just as clients and not just as people that you teach, but as information sources, as colleagues, as people that you can develop a real relationship with. And if that was there, I believe there would be a whole lot more people that wouldn't have personally chosen to put those things on those cards, because it would be much easier to connect that with the human being that doesn't want their accidents made fun of, doesn't want what they will do for a Skittle made fun of.
Yeah, and I want to add too, the ideas of, you know, I think Jeff touched on this a little bit earlier. You know, we have gallows humor is in every field. Every field talks about the hardships or the downsides, but these are people we're talking about. And when we look at the cards, I'm not going to specifically reference them again because I don't want to trigger anyone, but when you start looking at those, yes, some of us might look at it as ABA people saying, that's not what that means. That's not the way we meant it. That's not the way we wrote it. That's the way they're reading it. And that's what matters. That is what matters. Like, use the cards, and I say we as a field, as anyone who played it, who looked at it, we used it for fun. This is their life we're talking about. And the fact that people are still trying to defend it, or at least just sort of say, you know, this was a while ago, it was just a few people, it's fine. Like, I don't think we've really acknowledged what we as a field are portraying ourselves to be. And I say portraying not to mean that we're faking it or that it looks like we're something different than we are. I mean, as this is what we are, and people can see this is what we are. And guys, we've got to be better than this. So.
Yeah, I think there's also getting into like defending the field, minimizing the role of the cards and defending the field. One of the ways that happen and has happened that has prevented a lot of healing or reckoning from taking place out of this is one of the ways you play defense is just not talking about it at all. And I can't tell you how many conversations in the ABA world referencing the fact that this happened have been disappeared over the years because it's uncomfortable and it reflects poorly. And so that's part of the playing defense, is not having a conversation, or of moderating the conversation, or of it's in the past and, you know, people apologized and let it drop, let it go, and if you don't, we'll ban you, and we will prevent you from continuing to try to have a conversation about this. And so, like, if you can't talk honestly about what happened, you can't learn any lessons from what happened. So I think that's part of why things failed.
And I think without talking about it, you know, at the time, I didn't think there was anything wrong with starting that thread. And if we don't talk about it, there's going to be somebody else like me who innocently comes in and says, oh, this seems like a fun idea. And the more that we knock those conversations down and we don't speak to it and talk about it in our ethics courses, the more likely we're going to go through this again. This is not going to be an isolated incident.
Yeah, I absolutely think if the perspective taking in whatever ways that are needed doesn't happen, it's not going to be another Cards Against Humanity deck. It's going to be something else. Um, and Shannon, I just want to say that, like, I don't think it's like I don't think you can necessarily blame yourself for having the idea for a deck, as I think I shared with you. Like, there's an actual autistic Cards Against Humanity deck floating out there that, from my personal perspective, I think is largely hilarious. Um, and like, I don't think it's not punching down. Um, it is a lot of wry observations, and so I don't think, like, I think um, I don't think it was a fair, like, hindsight's 2020, and I think it's totally reasonable to start something like that without knowing where it was going to go. But when it started going, I think uh, I think one of the things your field needs to really think hard about is, what is it that, for people that were seeing those cards and objecting to them, and I know there had to be plenty of people, because plenty of people don't like Cards Against Humanity. People weren't saying things. Why? Why is it an uncomfortable thing to tell other members of your field, hey, I am not sure we should be doing this? Hey, hold up. And I'm going to put that to, like, you as a field. I'm not in your field. I'm an interloper. But that's a hard discussion I think you need to have.
No, I 100% agree. We all should have been speaking up, and we were letting things slide. And there is a level of awkwardness of, should I call this person out publicly? Or how do I call this person out in a way that's actually not effective at all? That strategy doesn't work. So figuring out how we teach people, it is essential that we call out the people even who are, high up in our field, people who are, put up as this kind of pseudo celebrity. They're just as flawed. um, I think another factor that I wanted to speak to in our field in general, um, thinking about the people at the top of the field all the way to the bottom, we have this system of overwork and burnout. And so many of us, I know part of what sparked me starting the thread at all was this missing kind of social network, these missing reinforcers, in life in general, that, we're going to engage in these, behaviors that get us a lot of social attention. And that can all go back to this burnout and this, we've created an ABA culture in which we work people to death. We treat people as if they're billable hours, and what we end up doing is depersonalizing. We forget that, one, the people that we work with are humans. We forget that our employees and our staff are humans, that have lives, and that have, passions and dreams and things. So with the lack of systemic supports in the field of behavior analysis right now, not having enough qualified supervisors, having caseloads, I've heard people having 27 cases on their caseloads. It's insane. And how can you keep your humanity at that work level? So, not to say it's at all an excuse. And I think, getting at some of those systemic variables, and teaching companies and our field in general that this is not acceptable. And I'd like to open that up for some discussion from the group, because as a systems person, that was one of my first places that I went to, was we're burning out and taking our clients down with us.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that whole idea. Like, I've experienced as an RBT or as a BCAT, because some companies use that instead, that you're very much treated as a cog in a system and like not allowed to say, I don't fit well with this client. I think they would be better served to be with somebody else. You're not allowed to say that. You can get threatened with being fired or threatened with corrective action for not being a perfect fit for everybody, or like for needing a day off. Like you get in trouble for that sort of thing. So as an RBT from the bottom position, like that's something I personally experienced and is definitely a problem.
Yeah, I think the ABA culture is such that it depersonalizes as a science. It literally, we always talk about not the person, just the behavior. And you know, it's still people. We're the people behaving. In this case, we behaved badly. In so many cases, we behaved badly. We need to look at the people and our behaviors. We need to change our behaviors. And part of that is by remembering that there's people on both sides. There's the people talking, there's the people we're talking about. A point for Jeff's where he said, you know, other people make Cards Against Humanity decks. Yeah, they make Cards Against Humanity decks about themselves. Ours were all about making fun of our clients. That's what they were. We talk about our clients, we don't talk about ourselves. And that's a difference as well. And I think when we start just seeing everything that we do as just working with children and just making them do things, and then behaviors, the word behaviors just takes over people. And I think that happens in our field for a reason, as a default, as part of ABA. And I think humanizing everything is going to be the next step in our field, because right now it's not there.
Yeah, we've turned people into data points and numbers, and they're no longer, you know, humans.
Shannon, I empathize so much with distilling somebody down into a billable hour. I think like there's obviously there's a lot of that going on in a lot of profit maximization at firm levels that don't necessarily key into best interest of the person, best interest of employees, and you know, one of my backgrounds is I train on person-centered thinking and planning, and one of the key hallmarks of that, of what we believe we have good data to show, the most important thing in any type of relationship like this is the match. And like Alexandra was saying, like a lot of times that's not necessarily respected. And when there is not a good match, learning is way less effective. And y'all would probably disagree with me, but one of the things I will make an argument for is that what's more important than whatever methodology for teaching, whether it be ABA or ESDM or whatever, whatever that methodology is matters way, 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 way less than the personal connection and trust between the client and the BCBA or RBT.
Just so you know, I'm not.
Well,
I don't think any of us are right here in this panel.
Yeah,
but that's hard to quantify, and so a lot of times it falls off. And when it does fall off, and you don't make the space for that, and you don't have real personal, mutually validating connections, I think what you end up with is depersonalization, dehumanization, and people angry at whatever their day-to-day looks like, that puts them to want to blow off steam and create or play some of those cards.
I think everyone's making really great points around this. I don't really have anything to add on the topic of like the systems approach from a business standpoint, but I did want to add a little bit just on like the rest of the structure of the field, and maybe people might have some things to add as well. So there were two different areas that came to mind for me. One, how we become certified. The other, or not how we become certified, but how our certification is overseen. And then the other was in our coursework. So for me, I think having that oversight is important. So for a lot of other professions, they get their, degree, they do their training, and they have a board that they test with, like for lawyers or whatever, you take the bar and you pass and all that kind of stuff. But then each state has their own licensure, and that's what oversees the actual professional practice in that state. But right now we have a situation where our board oversees a lot of the things in our field, and they're working as a certifying body and a licensing body. So I think sometimes that leads to some difficulties with things being proper, or I don't even know the best word, but things are not given the oversight that they deserve. So I don't want to turn this into a should we have licensure debate or not, but that's just an observation that I made. I also wanted to note about, I'm really perplexed as to why we're a human service field. However, I've yet to see, and I haven't seen every graduate program out there, but a lot of the programs I'm familiar with don't include any training in areas that a lot of other human service fields include. So things like self-care, preventing burnout, and of course, most importantly, treating clients with humanity, dignity, and respect, which would also, tie in nicely, Jeff, with what you were saying about understanding the importance of that relationship and having the client and the therapist or BCBA having that really well-established relationship. Psychologists, social workers, lots of other human services, that they have whole courses on things like that, where they need to role play and they get feedback from their supervisors. And it's very well established before they're released to work on their own. It was a heavy focus at my graduate program, which was Florida State, where we read a lot of literature on humanity and dignity and respect. But it was a lot of like, this is what happened back in the 70s. This is in our past. Don't let it happen again, without any real skill building around ensuring that we were trained to work in that capacity and that we could do things that are compassionate, humane. So I think we have basically all three things, right? We need better oversight, better coursework, and the companies that we're working with, we have improvements that need to be made as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that among discussion of what failed here, the code of ethics failed, and enforcement of the code of ethics failed, because there is a code of ethics that virtually everybody participating in that thread was under, and I know quite a lot of people made reports. And I also have yet to find anybody saying that they faced any repercussions out of from the BACB, from Code of Ethics, for anybody that was involved. Furthermore, I know, I talk to plenty of people in the field, and plenty of people in the field tell me stuff like, yeah, it's enforcement doesn't happen. The effort of, for whatever effort that's put into this code of ethics, and how many times individual BCBAs will tut-tut at each other over, what is and is not inside the code. The reality is if you are not falsely representing yourself as a BCBA, when you have not passed your boards, by and large, you probably, no matter what you do, are going to encounter any type of sanction. And I don't like fear as a motivator, but fear is a motivator. And sometimes what keeps people in line, or at least second guessing whether or not this is a good idea, is if I got dragged in front of whatever, and had to defend myself, would I want to do that? And I think that's one of the things that fell apart, is there is not really good enforcement. And not to mention, I am a strong, when I talk like things that I see needing to change, which happens to be something I talk a lot about for people that know me, changing the code of ethics itself, because there's holes that you can drive a truck through. When you can define client 20 different ways, to include almost anybody in somebody's life rather than the person, then that kind of stuff doesn't force you to consider my professional livelihood could be at stake if I do not consider how this person right in front of me right here would be impacted by my actions. And so that's a failure point.
And something that came up for me when I'm thinking about, well, what was the failure here, is that I see conversations all over Facebook with ABA saying, we're a science. And bit of background, I studied physics in my undergrad. I know what science is. Just to throw that out there, but we don't engage in nearly enough philosophic doubt as a field, and that's part of science. And I remember being taught about that in my program, so I'm like, okay, cool. So we're supposed to be critical of our own practices, of our past information, to make sure that we're constantly driving the field forward, because we're science, obviously, that makes sense. Except in the ABA world, that doesn't happen. Like, people pile on if you dissent. And so I'm not seeing anybody practicing philosophic doubt. And we don't question professors or school programs or supervisors when they rely on research done in the 70s that teach ABA principles. We don't call each other out on bad behavior, I think under the assumption that extinction will stop it, but clearly, like, that isn't happening. And it's clear that there are enough people, like if you watch any thread, that don't see the problems or these cards as abusive or as bad, that by people remaining silent, they're being complicit in that problem. The situation with the cards makes it clear that these abuses and problems in the field aren't old ABA or in the past. They're practices being in the present, needs to be reckoned with so that we can be held accountable and see real change happening. I made a statement recently about a totally different topic, saying that the rug has become a roof, stop sweeping. And I think that applies here as well, that like systemically we don't call each other out. We don't, comments get deleted, or people are tone policed, or people are told that they're wrong and they don't understand ABA, or even worse, you're not autistic. How, like, telling an autistic person they're not autistic, like that kind of thing continues to happen.
You're too high functioning.
Yeah, that one. Have you seen my house? Kinds of things come up, and it gets swept under the rug. And at this point, like in this particular situation and many situations we're seeing in the world right now, that rug is now a roof over a lot of stuff that just needs to be reckoned with and needs to be dealt with. And if we keep sweeping, that's as far as I can take that analogy. Just stop sweeping, please.
Alexandra, I think the philosophical doubt conversation is so important, because like, look, as an ABA critic, one of the things, I don't live in your world, I just visit it, and one of the things I encounter all the time is dissent in critical opinions not being viewed as philosophical doubt, not being viewed as the jumping off point to thinking of what would be true if I was wrong, and let me test that. Let me see if this, what kinds of things would we see? Philosophical doubt. Instead, dissent is viewed as a threat, and it is not welcome, and it is not a jumping off place for a conversation or that opening to, like, just looking at things from a different perspective, and then, like, let's do some fact finding here, let's do some data collection, like all of the scientific process stuff. Dissent is something that the person is out of bounds for bringing, and encounters a lot of hostility and lots of not being welcome once you get labeled as an anti-person. And that closes off your field's ability to accept criticism, to take it, to recognize your own blind spots, and to change. And I gotta say, the the world that we are all working in, by and large, of providing services to people with disabilities, that world has changed dramatically in the last couple of years, and the couple of years before that, and the couple of years before that. And if you aren't changing with it all the time and are not open to that change, you are just getting left further and further and further behind in the fields that can rapidly internalize the shifts in perspective, like even language that was totally okay to ways to think and ways to put in somebody's plan, be it like an IEP, or in my world, we do a lot of service plans. Like I can recognize stuff that was written 5 years ago and it looks archaic, even stuff I wrote. And that's how fast things are changing. And when you guys don't have mechanisms to accept and really chew on that criticism, you aren't hearing that and you aren't part of the change. And so now you've, like as a field, from my perspective, you got to play a lot of makeup for not being as open and having the mechanisms to really have dissent and to hear critical voices and to really think about what those mean.
I think that it's really important what Alexandra was saying, and then Jeff, what you were saying about philosophical doubt. I would imagine if any student had the courage to bring it up to their professors or their supervisors, they would quickly get shot down. So if anyone's watching this and whether it's a current student, a current trainee, autistic self-advocate posting on a Facebook thread, that philosophical doubt, that questioning of what you're incorporating, just listen and reflect and think about how you can, improve what you're doing. And sometimes articles from the 70s might be read, but it should be more of this is how it started, right? And like, now let's read something from here. And have we progressed far enough? And if we haven't, how can we improve even more? Are we incorporating compassion, empathy, perspective taking, humanity, all of those types of things? And really more of a thought.
Are we including the person?
Right.
Is the person there?
Exactly.
Revolutionary thought.
Yeah. So the articles may not even exist yet, but if you're a supervisor or a professor, you have that unique opportunity to help your students or your trainees think about, this is what exists in our literature right now, and how can we make this more humane and consider the person, and what can we do to fix this, as opposed to just locking in and being like, nope, that's what the research says.
I see that all over the place in conversations of people or negating conversations because it doesn't exist in the literature. Like, okay, well, there's your problem. When was the last time research done on that topic? Like, why are we relying on it? Like, sure, you can say, well, it doesn't exist, but why is your question, or why aren't you questioning, where do we go from here? Why is your default to say, research says this, it's set in stone, it's the perfect thing? I'm like, oh, okay. Science.
So it sounds like we're kind of easing into a conversation of like, where do we go next? What are some prescriptions of things we can think about to address what happened here and take actions from a field basis to so it doesn't go here in the future. So what do we want to say about that?
Yeah, I think the things that we can learn from this and the things that we can do, some of the things are, don't be a bystander. Don't just watch as people go out of their way to be rude online to people who are trying to dissent, who are trying to bring up these questions. Add your voice rather than let someone stand alone fighting against this giant field who sort of throws science like we're trying to attack someone rather than trying to help them. So I think, adding more of our voices, being vocal, being outspoken, speaking up when we see these things happening, and not trying to take you know, when someone says 100 words of something and 2 of the words were said wrong, please, let's not focus on those 2 words and correct them. Let's take that 98 words, let's take the feeling behind it, let's take the passion behind it and say, this is what they're saying. They're experiencing something, they've experienced something, they're hurting. You know, we're talking about our jobs, they're talking about their lives. We need to listen to people who are talking about the effects of what we do, whether it's something that we do as a fun game, or whether it's what we're doing in our jobs every day and what we're doing to work. And I think that those types of things need to happen.
Sarah, riffing off of what you just said, I think in addition to speaking up, what's really important is making sure the right voices are elevated in the conversation. And in this case, I would say the right voices are autistic voices. But we've seen over the past weeks, months, and years, kind of in ABA culture, there have been times where the right voices are people talking about sexism. And I'm not the right voice to have a sexism conversation. Talking about racial justice issues, and the key hallmark where I've seen so many of those conversations go off the rail is the wrong people's voices are, we're not calling to elevate who should be at the center of that conversation and driving the conversation. And in self-advocacy circles, a hallmark phrase that you've probably heard is "nothing about us without us." Well, that carries over a lot more than just our groups. That goes all across the board. Whenever there is some of these conversations that are talking about people where their input and their experience is not anchoring that conversation, that should be red warning flag, full stop, and let's make sure that we are hearing those people and giving them space to speak, especially when we don't understand the issue like they are bringing to us. We need to seek that understanding, even if it doesn't reflect well on us or if we don't like it.
Yeah, and something that I'd like to bring up is we talked about making sure that we get to, newer behavior analysts, people who are just coming into the field right now and having these conversations. But that isn't sufficient. We need the people who have been in this field for a long time to acknowledge this. We need people at the top of the field. We can't do this work from the bottom up. We can't do it. So we need the top of the field acknowledging some of these conversations. At a lower, kind of a smaller scale, that means if you're a supervisor, you need to be having these discussions with your supervisees. And training isn't the sole solution. So Megan had mentioned earlier, training is a good place to start where we have these conversations. But we need to also have other processes for handling deviations from how we should be behaving. I'll say I probably should have contacted more contingencies than I did, given the gravity of the situation, and I didn't. So there should be more consequences in place for people who engage in these deviations, and they need to be integrated into your company culture. We clearly can't rely on the field to have those contingencies in place. So at least have them at that smaller scale and model and reinforce what we should be doing. So don't be that supervisor who says, let's play these at our Christmas party. And don't just have your ethics books on your bookshelf and your values on your walls. You actually have to live those things. And if you can't, you need to take them down and you need to put those books away. So this is a field-wide issue that we can't keep talking at the bottom of the field. We need to start working from the top down, not the bottom up.
And that seems like one of the ways to do that is, let's have a conversation about accountability. because when the top of your field, when leaders in your field aren't responsive to this, I think it begs the question, why are these people your leaders? And you don't have individual power towards that, but you have a lot of collective power. And I would tell you guys to use that. If the leadership, if the big names, if the people that have been around for a long time in your field don't reflect what you want your field to be, it is you and only you that can change that. It is you and only you that can do something about that. I can do nothing about that. I'm not going to get listened to. And it isn't my fight to fight. It is the fight of all of you. And so I think you can support each other in not feeling like that is too big and recognizing the power that you have. I know a lot of you work largely independently, and a lot of your get-together stuff is online space and like conferences and stuff, but you have a collective voice. And I can tell you, if there's no other motivation than to hold leadership accountable for things in your field that do not reflect the way you want them to be, you better hold them accountable, because you will all be held accountable. You will all have your names and the letters behind your names dragged through the mud on a daily basis. And I can tell you, saying it's in the past, it's only a couple bad apples, how many of these lines have we heard applying to stuff going on in society? And these are the same defenses that when I talk critically about problems I have encountered in your field that get raised all the time. It's the same kind of stuff. And it's not making you look any better. And the way to address the name of your field and the bad reputation that exists out there is not better marketing and better messaging and better dissemination. I think that's your word, right? It is accountability, and it is taking action, and it is raising your voices up and telling the people perpetuating the stuff that makes you look bad, stop. We do not support you and will not support you in this, and we will raise our voice. You all have power that you don't realize you have. The autistic folks and us on the outside, we see that power because it's the same power we're seizing. It is the same, how many times we've been called the voice of the voice, the voiceless, ignored, not even invited to the table, and we demand to be there. And we're not afraid of that. And that's one of the things you can learn, is the effectiveness of just being there and speaking your truth.
Thank you, Jeff. Again, that's a lot, very insightful. I really like the point about accountability. Shannon, I think that your points about having that company culture is really important as well. I had a few other things, or maybe similar things, that I thought of for this, what we can do. One, the training needs to occur with agencies, university supervision, and disseminated from the top down. I think sometimes it's a little harder because there are so many universities that potentially working with the professional organizations and trying to get more movement going with them disseminating information down to the universities and companies and individual providers about even just how to engage in difficult conversations and really listen to non-behavior analysts, consumers of services, and the population at large. As much as I loved my graduate training, even when I earned my PhD, it was either not discussed at all, or we were taught the opposite. You are the expert. You know all of the things. Shut everyone else out. Stand your ground, right? We weren't taught how to, sit back and listen and have these difficult conversations with people. More work also needs to be done with agencies and professional organizations and universities to involve the consumers we serve. So I think, Sarah, you mentioned this, Jeff and Alexandra, you obviously mentioned this as well, but include autistics and whatever other populations you're serving, and get the feedback as you're making decisions and as you're creating your policies, so that you can have that to work from before and not after the fact. I think another important piece of that is to seek out whatever population you're serving when you're looking for that feedback. If you have a board of advisors or wherever that feedback is coming from, it's not like you touch base with someone that you've seen posting who is active in these spaces and just say, hey, will you take a look at something for me? But it should be more along the lines of some sort of paid or mutually beneficial situation. Not everyone, especially if it's like a brand new company or something, might have capital right away, but there could be some sort of agreement that's made. So we shouldn't be seeking input from places for free, if that makes sense. And then the last thing I thought of is that we all need to stop being silent. When you see something, say something in a way that can help move the conversation forward. Refrain, obviously, from personal attacks. Be curious and share a different perspective in a way that is not harsh or combative. If it isn't your place to speak up, hold space for those who are already talking, and encourage your peers to do the same. Those were my thoughts on what we can do better. And of course, if anyone has thoughts, I kind of went on a tangent with number 2 about including voices. So if anyone has any additional comments on that or like points of disagreement, I would love to hear those.
I do have thoughts on listening to autistic voices. This is something that I've begun to work on, and I'm trying to continue to do that, and telling other people to do it. And it's listen to autistic voices, which is hard for us in ABA at first because they keep getting banned from our groups when they try to tell us. They keep getting shut out. Their threads are being deleted. You know, some of the people, if you're still watching this video and you're going, I have no idea what this Cards of Humanity thing is, it's because it was all deleted and people keep hiding this. And we need to make sure that we seek out, we find, and we listen to these autistic voices. There are websites on the internet, there are blogs, there are articles that they've written, there are tons of information. And then there are people who are willing to talk to us, thank God, because we haven't made it very, friendly for them to want to talk to us, but they are, because they care about our clients, because they are autistic themselves. These are not people, people say this in posts, these are the people who don't speak for our clients, or these people don't understand ABA. They've used this term wrong, so they clearly don't understand ABA. And I think maybe sometimes we don't understand ABA, or at least what the impact it has on our clients, or the way it's seen from outside, and how much damage it can do.
Or what people in your profession are actually doing.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, there's a ton of ignorance about
not what it looks like, but what it, like, literally what it is. And yeah, so like what we read about and then what we do, and sometimes that's completely different. Sometimes what we read about is also awful and we don't even see that. And I think, this culture that we have of we're the best, ABA is the best, ABA is what knows, we know how to teach everything, and we're the only ones who know how to teach everything, and everyone else is terrible. That's really bad. It's hurting our clients, it's hurting our community, it's hurting our field, guys. Like, we all sound like dicks. Like, I'm just saying, like, outside, I mean, even in the field, I think ABA are dicks. You're gonna have speech therapists, OT, autistic people, pretty much everyone agrees with that, I believe. Now, Jeff, you agree with that, I assume, right?
I really felt the article somebody wrote on, I think, LinkedIn about board certified behavior asshole. And as somebody that works adjacent to the field, I got to tell you, there are a lot of people I encounter that your field has burned bridges through professional interactions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't think it's my place necessarily to belabor that point, but it is very real. It feels like there's a certain amount of antagonism that's written into a lot of graduate programs themselves, or superiority or stuff like that. But I did want to backtrack to one point I really wanted to make when talking about, there's a lot of people have brought up listen to autistic people. I would just remind everybody to scale that down. Scale that down to your autistic client. And look, you know, whenever I say that, there's somebody in the audience that is saying, well, I would love to include so-and-so in this, but they're not capable of doing that. They're 3 years old, or they don't speak, or this or that. And look, I'm a case manager. I have to write a plan for my client, reflecting my client's wishes, interests, and values as my client. Not what I think is good for them, not what I think they should want. If it doesn't reflect them, it's invalid because they are the person I represent and have a professional responsibility to. Same for you guys. If you do not know what your client, whether your client is 18 months old or what the abilities of your client is or anything else, if you do not have a sense of what my client's values are, what my client likes in this world, what is important to my client, where my client sees their future, if you can't answer questions like that, you may need to get that person in front of somebody who can. You definitely, if you keep seeing that person, need more information and need to be able to capture that. For anybody, whether they tell you in words or not, they have preferences that should be respected. And if you can't figure out how to build that into your program, you need to, or you need to pass them to somebody that can. They are your client, and that is what client means. And respecting, you know, tying this back, because I feel it's a little bit tangential, but like tying it back to those cards, if that was truly valued, I can't imagine a single one of those offensive cards. I just can't.
I definitely agree. I think that when we lose sight of who our client is and where our goals come from, they don't come from the VB map. They shouldn't come from the VB map. They should come from our clients. Our clients aren't little check boxes on a page. They're people. And I think we need to remember this. And I think also we need to remember that the people who are speaking up on Facebook pages against things that our field are doing, I mean, the Cards Against Humanity thing, yes, but everything else that we're doing as well. When people speak up against it, we shouldn't get defensive. We need to speak up, we need to listen to them and think about it. And when other people start minimizing and pushing them away, we need to use our voices to speak up and say, no, let's listen to these people. It's valid. We need to hear this. You know, we need to stop just watching the conversations go by and, you know, getting out popcorn and just watching it. We need to speak up. We need to speak out. We need to rally against them, or we need to rally for them instead of against them. We need to say, hey, it's not okay to belittle and push away and, you know, stigmatize people who are trying to help. You know, we need to get angry and we need to get upset when autistic voices are ignored, or when any dissenter in our field is ignored. When anyone who says anything against us, we shouldn't just ignore them. We should think, I mean, that's philosophical doubt. It's kind of what we've pulled back to. We need to speak about that. And when we know better, we do better. So let's not let something like this happen in our field ever again. And if it does, I hope that we all speak out against it immediately, loudly and forcefully, instead of it taking 5 years for all of us to get together and speak about this.